I pushed open the front door and froze. No lights, no garland on the staircase, no smell of pine or cinnamon. Our house had always come alive this time of year, every corner stuffed with Christmas chaos. But now, it looked abandoned. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator. I set my bags down and called out, "Hello?" No answer. My heart was pounding as I walked into the kitchen, and there she was, Grandma Eleonora, sitting at the table in her everyday cardigan, eating cold rotisserie chicken under the harsh kitchen light. No Christmas dress, no holiday music, just silence. She didn't even look startled, just weary. She pointed at the fridge. That's when I saw it, an index card, stuck under a magnet, shaped like a souvenir from Branson. My mother's handwriting, her signature flower doodle scrawled across the margins. I peeled it off and read aloud. Used your $12,400 loan for a Caribbean cruise. Back in 6 days. Please take care of Grandma. I stared at the words until they blurred. My final semester loan. The money I'd fought so hard to avoid borrowing until the very end. The money meant for my clinical rotations, for licensing exams, for the finish line after years of double shifts and ramen dinners. My parents had drained it in a matter of hours. I should probably tell you who I am. I'm Sierra Blake, 27, a nursing student, 3 months from graduation. I live in Boston now, juggling shifts at a retirement home and late nights in the library. But I grew up here in Seattle. Every December, no matter how crazy school got, I came home. I wanted 1 week of family, of noisy dinners and twinkling lights. That was supposed to be this trip. Instead, I'm staring at a note that says, "My future is floating in the Caribbean with my parents, Harold and Diane, my brother Jacob, and my sister Olivia." My stomach twisted. I knew the weak point the moment I read it. The legacy joint account. When I was 18, Dad insisted on opening it for emergencies. Over the years, I moved all my spending to my own accounts. But the school still used the old one for large deposits. I never closed it. Maybe I didn't want to deal with the paperwork. Maybe I still thought, stupidly, that my family wouldn't cross that line. But they had. Using an old login and a one-time authorization, they wired my money straight into their vacation. Grandma chewed slowly, her eyes watching me. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The shame in her expression was enough. I pulled out my phone, maybe hoping to see a text from my mom explaining this away. Instead, I found photos. My family, decked out in leis, smiling under the Caribbean sun, holding fruity drinks. I wasn't tagged. Of course not. I wasn't even on the family list anymore. They had excluded me and Grandma, thinking I wouldn't see. They thought I'd be too embarrassed to tell anyone. Then my phone buzzed again. A text alert. Pending sale authorization for your Corolla. Confirmed to release vehicle title. I blinked hard. They hadn't just taken my money. They had tried to sell my car while I was in the air. My hand shook as I hit deny. And that's when Grandma calmly folded her napkin, set it on the table, and looked me square in the eyes. "We end this," she said softly but firmly. "But we do it our way. Before I go further, let me pause. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever been forced to draw a line with your own family. What happens next changed everything. I wish I could tell you this betrayal came out of nowhere, but deep down, I knew the pattern. For years, I had been the safety net, the invisible wallet no one acknowledged until they needed me. When Dad's sales commissions ran dry, he'd call with a defeated sigh, and I would wire money for the mortgage. When Mom maxed out another card on things she swore were investments, I'd step in to keep collectors from calling. Jacob needed gear for his makeshift music studio. And Olivia cried about art supplies for a project she claimed was life or death. Each time I told myself, it's family. They'll pay me back eventually. Each time, Grandma would just shake her head and whisper, "Love without limits creates monsters, Sierra." I didn't want to believe her. I thought being the reliable one meant I was being good. I thought sacrifice was love. But standing in that silent kitchen, watching my grandmother chew cold chicken under a bare light bulb while my parents sipped cocktails in the tropics with my tuition money, I finally felt the truth of her words. As if the universe wanted to make sure I understood, another email notification lit up my phone. It wasn't from the school. It was from a car dealership in Portland. Subject line: vehicle sale, authorization. My pulse spiked. I opened it and froze. There was a photo of my license plate, my VIN number, a form ready for digital signature. The supposed seller had typed in my mother's maiden name and an out-of-state phone number. For a second, I tried to convince myself it was just spam. But it wasn't. This wasn't a stranger guessing at my details. It was someone from inside my family, trying to cash out the only thing of value I had left. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. My car was my lifeline in Boston, my route to work, to class, to every clinical shift that paid the rent. Without it, I couldn't keep my jobs, couldn't finish school. I glanced at Grandma. Her eyes narrowed, sharp despite the years. "You see it now?" she asked. I nodded slowly, the weight of denial breaking apart inside me. "They're not just careless," I whispered. "They're deliberate." She pushed back her chair and disappeared into her room. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the email, my hands trembling. For the first time, I wasn't just hurt. I was angry at their entitlement, angry at myself for letting this cycle continue. When Grandma returned, she carried a faded spiral notebook, its cover softened by time. She placed it between us on the table and opened to the first page. In her neat, looping script were 3 words, written like a battle plan: locks, evidence, paper trail. She looked at me with a fire I hadn't seen since childhood. They thought leaving us here with scraps would make us stay quiet. They believe shame will keep us in the shadows. But we're going to do this differently. Not with screaming, not with tears, with preparation. I touched the page, still unsure if I had the courage to follow through. Part of me wanted to call the police immediately. Another part wanted to curl up and pretend it wasn't happening. Grandma closed the notebook with a decisive snap. "Project Payback," she said. The title alone sent a chill through me. And then she flipped to the second page, where her plan truly began. Grandma slid the spiral notebook across the table, but before we could start filling in the details, she sighed. Her hands, fragile and veined, rested on the worn cover. "Sierra, there's something you need to know," she said. I looked at her, bracing myself. "Years ago, when your grandfather passed, I sold our little house. I thought moving in with your parents was the right thing. Harold promised me my own den, a safe place to live out my years. But most of that money," she paused, her eyes clouding, "it disappeared. Credit cards, a fancy kitchen renovation, trips I never wanted to take. They drained what your grandfather and I saved for decades." The words sliced through me. My chest tightened. All this time, I thought I was the only one they leaned on, the only one they bled dry. But they had done it to her, too. We walked through the house together, flashlight beams catching corners I used to know. On the counter, a pile of unpaid utility bills, some already stamped final notice. The fridge held little more than a carton of eggs and a near-empty jar of pickles. In the hallway, a calendar hung on the wall. Grandma pointed to a note scrawled in my mother's hand. Hold mail resumes, December 28th. I did the math. They hadn't even planned to be back in 6 days. They told the neighbors December 23rd, told me they'd be gone less than a week. But the post office had instructions until the 28th. They had lied to everyone, not just me. Back in my old room, I opened my laptop and logged into the bank portal. My fingers hesitated before clicking account activity. The numbers glared back at me. $12,400 gone. But that wasn't what stopped me cold. The log showed the transaction had been authorized at 5:42 a.m., the morning they left. The IP address? Our own house. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some mix-up with the bank. It was Dad, sitting at his laptop before sunrise, hitting transfer while I was packing my suitcase in Boston. They made a deliberate choice. I could feel the blood roaring in my ears. My entire body trembled with fury. My phone was in my hand, and I had already pulled up the keypad. 911. 3 digits between me and the police report that could blow everything open. I stared at the screen. The logical part of me screamed, "Call. This is theft. Protect yourself before it's too late." But another part, the part shaped by years of family loyalty, of whispered promises that "we'll do better," hesitated. I glanced at Grandma. She was watching me closely, her jaw set, her eyes burning with equal parts sorrow and determination. She didn't tell me what to do. She just let the silence stretch. Finally, I pressed the red end button and let the phone fall to the bed. My voice was low, almost foreign to my own ears. I'm not giving them the spectacle they want. They'd twist it. They'd call me ungrateful, tell everyone I had my own parents arrested right before Christmas. Instead, I opened a new tab, canceled the old account, and froze every linked card. Click. Done. I turned to Grandma. I want consequences they can't dodge, I said, my voice shaking but steadying with every word. Not a scene they can spin. Her lips curved into a thin, approving smile. But I had no idea just how far she was willing to go to make sure they paid. The next morning began with the sound of tires crunching on the icy street outside. For a moment, I thought my family had returned early, but it was only Martin, the locksmith Grandma had called. He was in his 70s, compact and wiry, his hands scarred from decades of metalwork. He nodded at me once. No judgment in his eyes, just quiet efficiency. "Your grandma filled me in," he said, stepping into the cold entryway. "Let's get you some security." I watched as he removed the old locks, the ones my parents had carried off with their luggage, and replaced them with heavy new deadbolts. Then he installed a digital keypad above the handle, showing me how to change the code whenever I wanted. "Temporary code for now," he explained. "You control who gets the numbers, not them." The symbolism hit me harder than I expected. For the first time in my life, the doors to this house opened only when I said so. By mid-morning, Terry arrived. She wasn't the stern, gray-suited lawyer I had pictured, but a brisk, sharp-eyed woman in her 60s, with a leather portfolio and a voice that brooked no nonsense. She listened as I laid out the details: the loan disbursement, the attempted car sale, the empty refrigerator. Then she opened her portfolio and pulled out a printed contract. "This is a repayment agreement," she said. "It acknowledges the unauthorized withdrawal of your funds, sets a repayment schedule, and includes reimbursement for every cent you've had to cover: the locksmith, the overdue utilities, even the tuition penalties. I've added a modest interest rate. Nothing punitive. Just enough to make the point. I traced the neat lines of text, my heart thudding. It felt surreal to see my pain translated into legal language. Each betrayal assigned a dollar amount. By afternoon, Grandma and I moved methodically through the house, photographing everything: the fridge note, the bank screens with the time-stamped transfer, the dealership email with my license plate, the Instagram photos of my family ziplining in the tropics, even the empty pantry shelves. Evidence, Grandma reminded me. Proof they couldn't brush aside with excuses. We decided only 2 of her friends would join us later. Not an army, just witnesses. Enough to keep things honest, not enough to turn it into a circus. As the winter light faded, Terry called with an update. "I dug into their cruise booking," she said. "They changed their return flights midway through, and they canceled an excursion. That means they've got refund credits waiting. Liquid funds you can demand immediately." I felt a spark of grim satisfaction. For once, we weren't the ones scrambling to patch their disasters. We were building a case, brick by brick, stronger than any of their excuses. That night, Grandma brewed tea, and we sat with the spiral notebook open between us. She wrote, Phase 1, secure home. Phase 2, secure evidence. Phase 3, prepare legal leverage. The words looked like marching orders. She glanced up at me. They've always assumed we'd clean up the mess quietly. But this time, Sierra, they're going to feel the cost. Her voice carried a steel edge I'd never heard before. And for the first time in years, I felt less alone. Then my phone buzzed again. Another notification. I swiped it open. Gift shop charge declined. I blinked. Even after draining $12,400, they were still trying to buy trinkets in my name. I set the phone on the table. My hands were steady now. And that's when I realized they weren't just reckless. They were shameless. And shameless people don't stop until someone makes them. The next day, I woke up with a list. Not their list, mine. The spiral notebook sat on the kitchen table like a loaded weapon, each page a reminder that I wasn't powerless anymore. First, I called the bank's fraud department. My voice trembled at the start, but steadied as I spelled out every detail. The unauthorized wire transfer, the attempted car sale, the ridiculous gift shop charges. The woman on the line was sympathetic. She placed a fraud monitoring note on my credit file, blocked any new withdrawals, and flagged my name so no one could open accounts under it. Next, I dialed the dealership in Portland. "That Corolla is mine," I said, my jaw tight. The supposed seller had no right to use my information. Cancel the file, lock the record, and don't release the title to anyone but me in person. The manager promised he would flag it immediately. When I hung up, I felt a small surge of control return to my chest. Finally, I called the financial aid office in Boston, left a detailed message, and then marched down to the local bank branch to open a brand new account in my name only. "Send all future disbursements here," I told them, handing over the routing number like it was a lifeline. For the first time since I'd found that note, I felt like I'd built a wall between me and them. While I handled the money, Grandma handled the battlefield. She called Martin and Terry again, coordinating when they could be present. She scribbled down time slots in her neat handwriting. "We won't meet them here," she said, tapping her pen against the notebook. "They'll walk in, see the new locks, and realize the rules have changed. Then we'll move the conversation to Magnolia Coffee. Neutral ground, public eyes. No screaming matches in this house." That evening, we sat together, rehearsing. Grandma played every role. My father's bluster, my mother's trembling tears, Jacob's jokes, Olivia's avoidance. I practiced one word over and over until it rolled off my tongue without hesitation. No, I won't excuse this. No, I won't let you twist it. No, I won't sacrifice my future for your vacations. Every time I stumbled, Grandma would tap her finger on the page labeled Project Payback and say, "Again, stronger." By dusk, my phone buzzed. A new message. My chest tightened when I saw the sender. "Jacob, don't blow this up. Dad said we'll make it right eventually. Don't embarrass us." I stared at the screen, the words burning. He knew. He knew they had stolen the money, tried to sell my car, left Grandma behind. And still, his priority was family reputation, not the truth. I typed a reply, erased it, typed again. My fingers hovered over the send button before I finally locked the phone. If I answered, I'd slip back into explaining, apologizing, patching things up for them. That was the old Sierra. She had to stay buried. Grandma slid a cup of tea toward me. "What did he say?" she asked. I shook my head. "He wants me quiet." She nodded slowly, as if she had expected nothing less. Later that night, I refreshed the cruise tracker, watching the tiny digital ship icon crawl across the map. My heart stuttered when the status changed. Docked early. Minutes later, my airline app buzzed. Flight landed. Tonight. I closed my laptop, the room suddenly colder than the snow outside. They were on their way home, 2 days sooner than we thought. The first chime of the doorbell cut through the quiet like a siren. Grandma and I exchanged a glance. Frost clung to the window panes, the December night pressing in cold and sharp. My pulse hammered as I rose, my slippers silent against the hardwood. Through the peephole, I saw them. Sunburned faces, rolling suitcases, cheap straw hats perched on their heads. They looked like strangers, not family. Dad jiggled his key in the lock. Once, twice. The deadbolt refused him. "What the hell?" he muttered, voice muffled through the door. He tried again, harder this time. The lock didn't budge. I reached for the new keypad, pressed the intercom button, and let my voice carry. "Your keys won't work." There was a pause. Then Dad leaned toward the small camera, his face filling the screen. "Sierra, open the door. It's freezing out here. This is my house." My throat tightened, but I forced my voice steady. "It's Grandma's address, and now it's my secured space until the debt is addressed. Read the terms." The porch went quiet. Behind him, Jacob shifted from foot to foot. Olivia hugged her coat tighter, and Mom frowned at the keypad, as if sheer will might make it obey. From across the street, the Henderson kids had pressed their noses to the frosted glass, wide-eyed. Mrs. Patel stood in her driveway, arms crossed, pretending to adjust her scarf as she watched. My family, who lived for appearances, were suddenly on display. Dad's voice rose. "This is ridiculous. We're not having this conversation out here. Open the door, Sierra." Mom stepped forward, her tone syrupy, sweet. "Honey, we didn't steal anything. That account was a family account. We thought it was for all of us." I pressed the speaker button again. "It wasn't. It was my student loan disbursement, restricted by federal guidelines. And the bank logs show the transfer came from this house at 5:42 in the morning, the day you left, using Dad's laptop." Her eyes darted away. Dad's face flushed crimson. He opened his mouth to protest, but before he could get a word out, Terry's crisp voice filled the air from the phone in my hand. I had her on speaker, her tone cutting through the night like glass. "That money was not communal," she said. "It was a designated educational disbursement. Using it for personal travel constitutes misappropriation, and the digital trail is clear. IP logs place the transaction here. You cannot spin this as a mistake." The silence that followed was heavier than the snow-laden clouds above. Jacob muttered something under his breath. Olivia looked down at her boots, cheeks pink with more than cold. I tightened my grip on the phone, feeling every eye on me. My neighbors, my siblings, my parents, even Grandma standing tall behind me. For once, I wasn't shrinking back. Dad's knuckles rapped the doorframe. Enough of this drama. We're coming in. I shook my head, leaned into the speaker. No, you're not. Mom gasped softly, as if the word itself were violence. I took a deep breath, the air stinging my lungs, and delivered the final blow. We talk at Magnolia Coffee in 15 minutes, with Grandma, and with our attorney, or not at all. The second chime of the doorbell echoed, sharper this time. Their laughter was gone, replaced by a simmering tension I could feel through the door. And, as their whispers grew urgent on the porch, I knew the real battle was only minutes away. Magnolia Coffee smelled of cinnamon and espresso, its windows glowing warm against the icy night. We chose the farthest corner, away from the chatter of holiday shoppers. Grandma sat beside me, her spine straight as a ruler. Terry spread the repayment agreement on the table, her leather portfolio snapping open with military precision. The bell over the door jingled, and in walked my family, red-faced from the cold, dragging their suitcases behind them. For once, they weren't laughing. Dad scanned the room, spotted us, and stalked over with Mom, Jacob, and Olivia trailing close. I didn't stand. I didn't smile. I simply pushed the folder forward until it rested between us. "Read it," I said. Dad opened his mouth, but Terry's voice sliced through the tension. "This is a legally binding repayment agreement. It details the unauthorized withdrawal of $12,400 from Sierra's educational account. It outlines reimbursement sources, your canceled excursion, your flight change credits, followed by a 10-month payment schedule with modest interest. If you fail to comply, Sierra is prepared to pursue civil action and notify both the university and the lender of fraudulent use of federal funds." Mom's face drained. Dad's jaw tightened as he flipped through the pages. "This is absurd," he snapped. "We don't need lawyers. We're family. Family doesn't drain tuition accounts for cocktails on a cruise ship," Terry said, matter of fact. Jacob leaned forward, his voice low. "Look, we all had a good time, okay? What's done is done. We'll pay her back when things calm down." I shook my head, forcing my eyes to stay locked on his. "No, actions have consequences. This isn't about when it's convenient for you. It's about accountability, starting now." The words seemed to ricochet around the table. Mom's eyes filled with tears. "Sweetie, we were always going to make it right. You're blowing this out of proportion. We thought—" "You thought wrong," I cut in. My voice didn't waver this time. "You thought I'd stay quiet, like always. But that ends tonight." They cycled through every move I had practiced with Grandma. Denial, anger, pity, bargaining. Dad slammed his palm on the table, muttering about his authority. Mom sniffled, pleading about how hard the year had been. Jacob joked about me being dramatic, then begged me not to ruin Christmas. And then the room shifted. Olivia, who had been silent until now, pulled out her phone. Her hands trembled as she tapped the screen. "You all need to see this," she whispered. She turned the phone so the table could see. It was Mom's Facebook settings. A screen recording Olivia had taken, scrolling through the family list. Every cousin, every neighbor, every distant uncle was included, except me and Grandma. We had been deliberately excluded from every cruise photo. They hadn't just forgotten us, they had hidden us. The air thickened. Even the hum of the espresso machine seemed to fade. Mom's lips parted, but no words came. Jacob muttered, "Liv, what are you doing?" "I'm done lying," she said quietly. Her eyes finally met mine. They knew you wouldn't see. They wanted it that way. For the first time all evening, Dad looked uncertain. His face hardened, but his shoulders sagged just slightly, as if the fight had leaked out of him. He shoved the folder back toward Terry. "We'll sign," he said, voice like gravel. His eyes, though, locked on me, sharp and unyielding. "But we get back in the house tonight." The table went silent. I felt Grandma's steady presence beside me, her hand just inches from mine. I looked at her, my throat dry. She gave nothing away, and I sat there, staring at my father, saying nothing at all. The pen scratched against paper, one by one. Dad's jaw locked as he scrawled his name last. Pressing the ink so hard, the pen nearly tore through the page. Terry gathered the signed agreement with a calm nod, slid it into her portfolio, and looked at me. "It's done," she said. I didn't celebrate. "Not yet." "Before you go back to the house," I said, "I need proof." They stared at me, confused, until my phone buzzed. A receipt lit up the screen. Refund from their canceled excursion, transfer of the airline credits, even a line item for the pawn shop sale of those tacky cruise trinkets. The first payment, small but real, was sitting in my account. Only then did I tap a new code into the keypad system, one Grandma and I had chosen together. I read the digits aloud, slow and measured. "This is temporary, until you prove you can follow through." Dad bristled. Mom's eyes filled with tears again. But the door opened, only because I allowed it. The following weeks were a blur of awkward breakfasts and tense silences. Every bill was photographed and logged, every expense tracked in a shared spreadsheet. Grandma's Social Security checks went straight into her own account, no more disappearing from her purse. If anyone borrowed money, they signed for it, in writing. They hated it at first. Dad snapped that I was treating them like tenants. Mom sulked when I refused to hand her my debit card for just one more emergency. But every time they tried to push back, I reminded them of the agreement. Actions have consequences. Slowly, change began to take root. Dad picked up weekend consulting jobs, humbled by the reality that his charm no longer paid the bills. Mom started selling her mountain of impulse buys online, learning the bitter taste of letting go. Jacob, who had begged me to stay quiet, finally muttered an apology over coffee. "I never realized how much you carried," he admitted, staring into his mug. And Liv, sweet Liv, began keeping receipts for every dollar she spent, as if she was determined not to become them. Relapses happened. There were moments when Mom tried to sneak purchases through, or Dad hinted at just one more loan. But this time, I didn't fold. Each no came easier. Each boundary held stronger. And every time, Grandma's voice echoed in my ear. "Love, without limits, creates monsters." Thanks to her bridge loan, carefully documented and signed, I registered for my clinicals on time. I paid her back month by month, interest included, and the day I handed her the final check, she smiled with quiet pride. "Now you understand," she said. "Helping doesn't mean surrendering. It means choosing wisely who you lift and how." When graduation came, Grandma sat front row in her best navy coat, her hands trembling as she clapped. I walked across that stage, diploma in hand, knowing I had not just earned a degree. I had earned back my own life. Months later, Grandma moved part-time to a small apartment near my hospital in Seattle. Our new Christmas looked nothing like the ones I once dreamed about. There were no towering trees or overdrawn credit cards, No glittering cruises or forced smiles. Instead, we shared a simple dinner, a few thoughtful gifts, each one bought with cash, and taped to Grandma's fridge, right next to a photo of me in my cap and gown, was the repayment chart, half the debt already returned. I'll never forget the note that started it all. I'll never forget the sound of my dad's key failing in that new lock. But more than anything, I'll never forget the lesson hidden in the wreckage of that Christmas. If setting boundaries makes you the villain in their story, would you still choose the boundary? Or keep living in the story that kept you small? Because here's the truth I carried into my new life. Love isn't about paying an endless bill. Real love is warmth with limits, compassion with accountability, and only when you stop excusing betrayal can you make space for something better, for healing, for dignity, and for a future built on respect.